Did you know that the Wild West wasn't just about cowboys and shootouts? The American frontier was a hotbed of strange and mind-bending events that will leave you questioning what you thought you knew about history.
Oh my God.
They saw aliens. We've all heard stories about alien abductions and UFO sightings. But did you know that these claims have been around for centuries, long before we had smartphones to capture mysterious objects in the night sky? The Wild West, with its vast open spaces and untamed frontier, was no stranger to such tales. One of the most intriguing Western alien allegations dates back to 1896 in the small frontier town of Lodi, California. H.G. Shaw, a Civil War veteran and journalist, made headlines when he claimed that he and a companion had a close encounter with extraterrestrial beings. According to Shaw's account, these otherworldly figures were astonishingly tall, standing at 7 feet, and had a remarkably slender physique. They possessed small hands, fingers without nails, and feet twice as long as a normal human's, functioning in a way reminiscent of a monkey's feet. Shaw's report didn't stop at mere observation. He offered a theory about the purpose behind these Martian visitors. He believed that these beings were inhabitants of Mars who had been sent to Earth on a mission to secure one of its inhabitants. Sound familiar? This early account seems to foreshadow the alien abduction stories that have become increasingly prevalent in recent decades. But the Lodi incident wasn't an isolated occurrence. Just a year later, in a tiny Texas town named Aurora, citizens reported witnessing cigar-shaped flying saucers gliding high overhead. In a bizarre twist of events, the town's residents claimed that a UFO had allegedly fallen from the heavens and exploded in the center of their community. Skeptics dismissed the incident as a mere meteorite crash, but rumors of an alien visit lingered for years. It appears that small-town life in the Old West was ripe for fascinating observations, whether stemming from isolation and boredom or genuine interactions with the unknown. The frontier, it seems, has always been a place of mysterious and suspicious space sightings. And while the Lodi and Aurora encounters captured the public's imagination, the most famous alien event in the West is perhaps the Roswell incident, which occurred in 1947. This event took place long after the Wild West era had passed, but it remains an iconic chapter in the history of alleged UFO sightings and extraterrestrial encounters. Even more recently, the Marfa lights have taken center stage in Texas, dazzling us with their enigmatic glow. It's clear that the Wild West then and now has always been a hub for peculiar and unexplained phenomena. Crazed cannibals roamed Nevada. It's time to travel back in time to the ancient lands of Nevada, where the native Paiute tribes have passed down chilling tales of red-haired band of giant cannibals who once terrorized the region. According to Paiute legends, these monstrous beings were known as the Sai-Ti-Ka, and their cannibalistic ways struck fear into the hearts of both native tribes and early settlers who ventured into the high deserts of the Old West. These giants were not just physically imposing, but also had fiery red hair, which added to their terrifying mystique. The Paiute believed that the Sai-Ti-Ka consumed a fibrous water plant that turned their hair a fiery shade of red. These cannibals would then embark on gruesome hunts for humans, their insatiable hunger driving them to commit horrifying acts. Thankfully, the Paiute, determined to put an end to this menace, took action. As recounted by Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, a Northern Paiute tribal activist and archivist, Paiute warriors devised a plan to trap all the Sai-Ti-Ka clan members inside a large, dark cave. Once they were confined within, the Paiute set fire to the cave's entrance, ensuring the cannibals met their fiery demise. The threat was eradicated, and the Paiute could finally breathe a sigh of relief. For generations, Paiute elders have preserved the stories of defeating these giants, stories passed down through the ages. Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, in a book about Paiute customs, wrote, "My people say that the tribe we exterminated had reddish hair. I have a dress, which has been in our family a great many years, trimmed with the reddish hair. It is called a mourning dress, and no one has such a dress but my family." However, as fascinating as this legend is, modern historians and folklorists have cast a more critical eye on it. While it's possible that a tribe with a genetic predisposition for red hair did exist in the region, they likely weren't giants. They might have been slightly taller than other tribes of the day, but the exaggerated accounts of their size may have evolved over centuries of oral storytelling. Regardless of its origins, the Saiti Cod legend is now an integral part of Paiute lore. To them, Nevada was once a land inhabited by very angry and very hungry giants. The Case of the Traveling Corpse. Let me tell you a story that will leave you baffled and slightly disturbed. It's the case of Elmer McCurdy, a wannabe outlaw with big dreams that took a bizarre twist. In 1911, McCurdy decided to take his chances and rob a passenger train in Oklahoma, believing he was transporting a fortune in bank funds. With visions of riches in his head, he embarked on this audacious heist. However, his dreams quickly turned into a nightmare. McCurdy, desperate to make off with something valuable, found himself holding a mere $46 after the robbery. And if that wasn't bad enough, law enforcement in Oklahoma tracked him down shortly after, ending his criminal career in a hail of bullets. But hold on to your hats, because that's where the normal part of this story ends. Things are about to get really weird. Following McCurdy's death, his body went through a series of bizarre events that no one could have foreseen. Initially, the outlaw's corpse was embalmed with a standard arsenic preparation, a common practice at the time. However, this was just the beginning of the strange journey that lay ahead. A traveling carnival, always on the lookout for the next money-making attraction, saw potential in McCurdy's infamous outlaw status. They bought his embalmed body and decided to hit the road with it. McCurdy's corpse became a featured sideshow at fairs across the Midwest. The story gets even stranger as over the next 6 decades, his body changed ownership multiple times as it was bought, sold, and exhibited by various county fair outfits. Even haunted houses and wax museums joined the macabre market for McCurdy's remains. The grand finale of McCurdy's unexpected adventure came in 1976. His body ended up in an amusement park funhouse in Long Beach, California, of all places. Television producers were filming scenes for the $6 Million Man, and they decided to use McCurdy's mummified corpse as a prop. During the shoot, a finger, or according to some accounts, an entire arm, detached from McCurdy's body. It was this grotesque incident that finally prompted action from the authorities. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office stepped in, demanding an investigation to verify the body's identity. Astonishingly, it was indeed Elmer McCurdy, who had met his demise more than 65 years prior in Oklahoma. This time, good sense prevailed. McCurdy's corpse was mercifully returned to the Wild West, where he was buried at long last in the famous Boot Hill Cemetery in Dodge City, Kansas. Camels once roamed the range. Here's a wild story from the Wild West. It involves a seemingly unlikely bunch of adventurers, some very special four-legged friends, and a quirky experiment in transportation. You see, before the Transcontinental Railroad was a reality, pioneers of the American West had a unique idea. They believed that camels could be the answer to their westward expansion dreams. Now you might be thinking, camels in the Wild West? Really? Well, hold on to your saddles. This story gets even more interesting. Camels, with their incredible stamina and ability to carry heavy loads for long distances, were considered promising prospects for travel in the rugged terrain of the western United States. So, in the 1840s and 1850s, supply trains began using these remarkable creatures on shorter journeys across various regions, from Texas to Washington. The turning point came when a man named Edward Fitzgerald Beale led several dozen camels on a 1,200-mile journey all the way to California, starting from the Midwest and ending just north of Los Angeles. Pioneers were in awe of this achievement and began to see the potential of camels as a game changer in the American West. One enthusiastic Confederate major, Henry Wayne, even stated that Americans will be able to manage camels not only as well, but better than Arabs, as they will do it with more humanity and with far greater intelligence. Let's set aside the racism of that era and focus on the optimism about the prospects of camels in the West. In 1857, the United States government decided to purchase hundreds of camels for logistical purposes, and these humped creatures were set out to pasture in Texas. However, their wild ride took an unexpected turn with the outbreak of the Civil War. Opportunistic Confederates in Texas rounded up the camels and put them to work, giving birth to what was known as the Camel Corps. Some of these camels were used for delivering mail and other goods, while others were caught and sold for profit to fund the war effort. In fact, one of them, Old Douglas, belonging to the 43rd Mississippi Infantry, became famous after being mortally wounded during the siege of Vicksburg. But ultimately, the Camel Corps didn't quite work out as well as they'd hoped. Camels, it turned out, were slow and temperamental, and horses and mules proved to be more reliable and efficient. As the years passed, once released wild camels began to roam the West. Among them was a camel living in the unforgiving Arizona desert known as the Red Ghost. This camel tragically trampled a woman to death in a frontier town, and tales of his wild exploits grew over time. However, wild camels in North America weren't destined to live on. As the West was gradually tamed and settled, the few dozen remaining wild camels eventually faded into history. The Southpaw Puzzle. Take a look at the mysterious story of Billy the Kid, one of the most infamous outlaws of the Wild West, and a little-known controversy surrounding his handiness. You might be surprised to learn that for a long time, historians and Wild West enthusiasts believed that Billy the Kid was left-handed. But let's unravel this intriguing tale. The source of this left-handed assumption is a famous tintype photograph of Billy the Kid from his youth. In the photo, he's seen with a gun belt on his left side and a Winchester Model 1873 lever-action rifle nearby. The gun belt on the left and the rifle in his right hand, which would leave his left hand free to pull the trigger, led to the understandable conclusion that Billy the Kid, whose real name was William Bonney, was a southpaw. Now, it would be an interesting twist to his already controversial life because left-handed individuals have always been a minority, both in the past and today. However, the reality might be quite different. You see, tintype photographs like this one were made by creating a negative image, which was then developed in reverse to appear positive. Consequently, the final photo was a 180-degree horizontal rotation from the original image. So, Billy the Kid's gun belt, which seems to be on the left in the photo, would most likely be on his right side in reality. And the rifle he's holding would probably be set up for him to pull the trigger with his right hand, not his left. But there's even more to this story. The specific model of Winchester rifle he's holding features a loading gate on the right side, even though it appears to be on the left in the picture. Again, this is due to the tintype's image flip. In fact, Winchester only made right-facing loading gates for the 1873 lever-action rifle, making it more convenient for right-handed individuals to use. Now, could it be that Billy the Kid was indeed left-handed but had to adapt to a right-handed world in the Old West? Certainly, that's possible. However, the photograph that many have pointed to as proof of his left-handedness isn't as straightforward as it may seem. Mines. Where are they? The Wild West has a number of enduring mysteries, the tales of lost mines and hidden treasures. While the legend of the camel known as Red Ghost may be a mix of fact and tall tale, it's just one among countless myths, legends, and rumors that have circulated in the American frontier. And none are more persistent and captivating than the intriguing stories of lost mines and undiscovered fortunes. The western frontier, with its rugged landscapes, became a magnet for prospectors and treasure hunters. It all began with various gold and silver rushes that lured thousands of individuals, young and old, daring and desperate, from the eastern parts of the country to seek their fortune out west. Now, most of them didn't find that pot of gold they were hoping for. Gold panning and mining proved to be arduous and often unfruitful endeavors. However, those lucky few who did strike it rich created a sense of hope, a glimmer of possibility. The idea that there was still a chance to find that one elusive, life-changing score took root in the imaginations of many. As a result, legends quickly spread about hidden mines, concealed treasures, and unearthed riches. The miners, so the stories go, had stashed away their newfound wealth to protect it from thieves, leaving behind a treasure trove yet to be discovered. Now, let's not kid ourselves. Most, if not all, of these tales were pure fiction. But that didn't deter hopeful prospectors and treasure hunters from sharing these stories. For decades, long after the gold rushes had ended, whispers of concealed mines and buried treasures found their way back east. One of the most famous and enduring tales is that of the Lost Dutchman's gold mine, set deep in the appropriately named Superstitious Mountains outside Phoenix. According to the legend, it was first dug by a German immigrant named Jacob Waltz nearly 2 centuries ago. For generations, prospectors have flocked to the area in search of this elusive treasure. However, nobody's ever found it, and some have lost their lives trying. And similar alluring legends of uncovered mines and hidden wealth can be found all across the American West. Names like the Wheelbarrow Mine in Idaho, Adams Diggings in New Mexico, Janney's Chimney in Washington, and the Lost Blue Bucket Mine in Oregon continue to capture the imagination of modern-day gold diggers and treasure hunters. The Crazy Crash at Crush. We're going back to the late 19th century to uncover the audacious tale of a man seeking to make the American railroad industry a major player. Meet William Crush, a railroad executive with an unquenchable thirst for the dramatic. In 1894, he had his sights set on financing a new railroad venture known as the Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad Company, or more popularly, the Katy. It was an age of rail, and Crush was determined to make an unforgettable mark. Crush was not to do these things by halves, so he concocted an extravagant plan to attract public attention. He decided to create a massive carnival in a temporary Texas town he conveniently named after himself. The main event of this carnival? Well, that's where things get a little crazy. Crush's grand spectacle involved smashing two colossal 35-ton train engines together to showcase the incredible might of the railroad. Yes, you heard it right. The main attraction was a train collision. It may sound bizarre today, but in the Wild West era, it was a resounding success by all financial and personal accounts, except for those unfortunate souls who met their demise in the shocking train crash. On the fateful day of the planned train collision, Crush's city became temporarily the second largest in all of Texas. More than 40,000 people flocked to the area from all around, drawn by the promise of a spectacle they would never forget. As Mr. Crush had assured, two steam-powered trains were set on a collision course, hurtling down the tracks at breakneck speeds of well over 50 miles per hour. And when these two behemoths collided, a deafening explosion shook the ground, sending steam, fire, and train parts soaring high into the Texas sky. Tragically, two individuals lost their lives in the massive explosion, and hundreds more were left injured. However, thousands more were convinced of the railroad's incredible power. One witness named J.C. Dean even received $10,000 from Crush's Katy Railroad Company after losing an eye during the catastrophic accident. Crush's outrageous antics horrified the railroad's overseers, leading them to dismiss him from his position. But as fate would have it, just days later, the railroad executives had a change of heart. They saw the immense public attention drawn to their railway after this shocking event and promptly rehired Crush, requesting more of his audacious stunts. It's a strange story from Wild West history, but the principle holds true. No publicity is bad publicity. The West's wild whiskey troubles. In the heart of the Wild West, where cowboys and pioneers roamed, another vice found a home beside gambling: whiskey. But don't imagine sipping fine spirits in a gentleman's parlor, because the whiskey of that era was a far cry from what we enjoy today. With names like 40 Rods, Tarantula Juice, Tao's Lightning, and other exotic-sounding concoctions, you'd expect a memorable experience, but probably not for the right reasons. In reality, these whiskeys were not for the faint of heart. They were outrageously potent and often contained some truly unbelievable ingredients, including literal poisons like strychnine. But that wasn't the worst of it. Some even included ingredients like turpentine and tobacco oil. When folks dared to take a swig, it was said that they need a second shot just to wash away the taste and memory of the first. If they managed to stomach it, they'd quickly find themselves in an inebriated haze after just a couple of rounds. Soon they'd forget what they were drinking, and with a little chemical-induced help, they'd drift off into a slumber, only to wake up and repeat the cycle the next day. The logistics of the time might offer some explanation. Western saloons were few and far between, towns were separated by vast distances, and supply lines were inconsistent at best. Add to that the lack of any meaningful food or beverage regulations in the 19th century West, and you've got a recipe for inventive concoctions. Sometimes, perhaps, a little too inventive. Yet one thing is for sure, they kept things interesting. So here's a question for you. Would you have had the nerve to down a shot of whiskey laced with strychnine or turpentine just to get a bit tipsy? Well, you can be thankful that the Wild West has already been won, and you'll never have to make that choice. The first phony film cowboy. If you're a fan of old Western films, the name Bronco Billy Anderson probably rings a bell. He's often hailed as America's first cowboy star of the silent film era, particularly for his role in the 1903 classic The Great Train Robbery. But the truth about Anderson's real-life background couldn't be more different from what you might expect. In reality, Anderson was born Maxwell Henry Aronson in 1880, an Arkansas native. His father was a traveling salesman, traversing the Ozarks to peddle products to local families and dry goods stores. However, young Maxwell had different aspirations. As a teenager, he left home and headed for the bustling streets of New York City. Once in the big city, he found his niche in the burgeoning film industry, producing silent movies and even starring in them. Over the course of his career, he was involved in hundreds of films. So, in essence, he was one of America's earliest movie stars. But here's the kicker. He wasn't a cowboy. He had never ridden the range, never spent time out west, and had no real connection to the Wild West. He simply portrayed the fictional character Bronco Billy Anderson in the iconic 1903 film, and the legend of the Wild West took off from there. For those with a skeptical eye, you might see him as the first in a long line of Hollywood stars with made-up backgrounds designed to captivate the movie-hungry public. Regardless, Maxwell Henry Aronson's portrayal certainly set a trend that continued throughout Hollywood history. Gunfight that was shockingly brief. When we think of the Old West, one iconic event that immediately comes to mind is the gunfight at the OK Corral. The name itself is unforgettable, and the story of that fateful day in Arizona in 1881 has remained etched in the public's memory. The showdown featured legendary figures on both sides. The Earp brothers, consisting of Morgan, Virgil, and Wyatt, joined forces with the infamous Doc Holliday. They faced off against a group of outlaws and scofflaws, including Billy Claiborne, Billy Clanton, Ike Clanton, and the McClary brothers, Frank and Tom. However, what's truly astonishing about this historic face-off is not just the names involved, but the breathtaking brevity of the entire ordeal. From the moment the first shot rang out until the dust settled, only 30 seconds elapsed. Yes, you read that right. Despite involving 9 men and a hail of bullets, the entire gunfight lasted less than half a minute. The gunfight at the OK Corral challenges the Hollywood image of lengthy, drawn-out gun battles with men taking cover behind wooden barrels and walls. In reality, this notorious duel happened in the blink of an eye, making it one of the West's swiftest and most infamous battles. To add a little twist to the tale, it wasn't even at the OK Corral, technically speaking. If we're being precise, the historic showdown occurred at the intersection of 3rd Street and Fremont Street in the city of Tombstone. This spot lies just outside the boundaries of the corral on the public road. So, even the name itself, OK Corral, is somewhat of a misnomer. The real-life TV saloon. If you enjoy Western TV shows, you've probably heard of Gunsmoke and Miss Kitty's Long Branch Saloon. Set in the notorious town of Dodge City, Kansas, the saloon was a familiar backdrop for the iconic series that depicted life on the frontier. But here's the twist. Miss Kitty's Long Branch Saloon was not just a creation for television. It was a real establishment with a history as intriguing as the Old West itself. The original saloon had its roots lost in the mists of time, making it difficult to pin down its exact establishment date. However, what we do know for certain is that the first incarnation of Miss Kitty's met a fiery end during the infamous Front Street Fire of 1885. This devastating blaze wreaked havoc on Dodge City, leaving numerous businesses in ruins and forcing many to close their doors forever. In the years that followed, the saloon was resurrected, although it was never quite the same as during its outlaw town heyday. Today, Miss Kitty's Long Branch Saloon still exists, but its purpose has evolved. It now serves as a place where devoted Gunsmoke fans can step back in time and relive some of the memories from their television-watching youth. The real-life saloon stands as a unique blend of history and nostalgia, bringing the Old West to life in a way that only Dodge City can. As you might imagine, the original Miss Kitty's was a wild hotspot for its time. While it offered more temperate beverages like milk, tea, and lemonade, it also served up some Old West essentials, including sarsaparilla, beer, and an assortment of stronger spirits. So, if you ever find yourself in southwestern Kansas and have a hankering for a taste of the Old West, you know exactly where to turn. The double-buried Jesse James. Jesse James, the legendary outlaw of the Wild West, led a life filled with notoriety and danger. However, the intrigue didn't end with his death. In fact, it's the events that followed his demise that make for one of the most bizarre chapters in the history of the Old West. After his infamous days of robbing banks and causing chaos, Jesse James decided to settle down at his homestead in Kearney, Missouri. But there was a catch. All the enemies he made during his tumultuous early years had long memories and violent intentions. Fearing that trophy hunters might rob his grave, James's family initially buried him in the front yard of his farm. For a while, Jesse James rested peacefully in his makeshift grave. But then, years later, his body was exhumed and given a more permanent resting place in Mount Olivet Cemetery, a small town in Missouri. It seemed like the end of the story, but the Old West has a way of surprising us. In 1948, decades after Jesse James's death, a man named J. Frank Dalton came forward, claiming to be the real Jesse James. He even managed to legally adopt the notorious outlaw's name. While in reality, Dalton was a 101-year-old individual with a fabricated story, the town of Granbury, Texas, embraced him and celebrated his death, turning it into a tourist attraction worthy of an old outlaw. The controversy over Jesse James's double burial sites created quite a stir. Decades later, DNA testing entered the picture. Scientists exhumed the remains of Jesse James in Kearney, confirming his identity through mitochondrial samples and debunked Dalton's claims. The truth finally came to light, but the myth had already grown too large to be entirely overshadowed. To this day, many believe that Jesse James is buried in Granbury, even though the evidence proves otherwise. Sometimes, legends are just too hard to bury. If you enjoyed these stories, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode of Vintage TV. And don't forget to share your favorite Wild West stories or legends in the comments below. Until next time, stay tuned.